looking at this, I'm still looking at you. I'm just looking
Yeah.
at this. Minister, can you explain what Luxembourg's involvement is with the European Investment Bank and why we're here today at the COP?
So the climate finance platform, together with the EIB, is a very important piece of the puzzle of the climate finance strategy of Luxembourg. So Luxembourg announced last year that we're going to invest 120 million euro, which makes 215 euro per person, which is a big amount if you look at the relative terms, on climate finance, on international climate finance mainly. And now this is part of the puzzle. We are working with one of the partners, which is our preferred partners, putting 30 million in order to have public money leveraging private money. Because if we want really to shift the billions, not only have this 100 billion by 2020, but shift the trillions, what we really want to do, then we really need private investors in, and there is where the platform starts. If there are projects which are risking, it's a kind of de-risking, and I think this platform will be an opportunity, a model for working together, and also a model maybe for others afterwards.
Out of COP21, there was a lot of talk about market signals coming from the politics and from government leaders. Is that what this is?
Yes, I think. Yeah, I would say that governments have several things to do if you look at climate finance. So we have to show the commitment to meet the 100 billion, but we also have to show our commitment by using regulatory framework, creating a good environment in order to have this paradigm shift also in investment on a private level. And we need to invest as a government. We tripled all the invest we make in public infrastructure. We tripled it during 3 years on investments which are environmental and climate friendly. So I think it's giving the sign, and we are analyzing possibilities to divest from fossil energy, for example, in our pension funds. So I think governments have to settle the scene, make a regulatory framework in order to have public money going where it has to go. So having really this transformative part of it, and governments can play a very important role in giving clear signals where the direction of travel will be.
And is there strong public support from civil society in Luxembourg for this move?
Yes, of course. In Luxembourg we have lots of public actors. We have, for example, a model in having local authorities working with us for climate issues. We call it Climate Pact. Nearly every local authority joined this movement in showing the little steps you can make using the energy you have at home, using wind, solar, but also forestry. And I think this, and together with circular economy, which is really a big issue in Luxembourg, the moment we're standing here, we are presenting a new economy model for Luxembourg at the moment. So, and I think we have lots of opportunities, economical opportunities. And if you're in a small country with not as much of resources, I think it's obvious that you have to get ready for climate resilience and climate neutrality. And for this reason, I would say we have lots of public support out there, lots of local authorities working with us, and we have a big opportunity having big partners with us, the biggest in the world, in order to shift the trillions like we want to do.
Fantastic. And Chris, with the European Investment Bank, what's the mechanism for scaling these investments, for making them do the most they can, the biggest impact?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is to continue where the minister left off, getting the millions to the trillions, the billions to the trillions. This is essentially a story about mobilizing the private sector. Governments, even governments who are giving generously, like Luxembourg does, cannot close the size of the investment gaps that are out there, the financing gaps that are out there. Even the biggest public institutions in the world can't close that gap on their own. So the whole, and you hear it again and again in this COP, this is mobilization, mobilization, mobilization. When we talk about delivery, when we talk about implementation, execution, we are really talking about mobilization of private flows, amongst other things. But it's a key thing. And this is a message that we, EIB, have been practicing now for some years. In particular, we have a program of environmental funds, investment funds, equity funds, debt funds, which target private sector co-investment. And typically, every dollar that the EIB puts in, we get $9 or $10 from other people, private sector people. So it's a good multiplier effect, and then there's a further multiplier effect on the ground at the level of the projects. And there are still, but there's just one point I make, there are still circumstances when, because it's a new sector, or because of the geography, or because of something, the risk is too great for us to do on our own balance sheet. And under those circumstances, that's when we need to go to the taxpayers of the world and say, you need now please to help us with some kind of financial support. And this is what the Luxembourg government is doing with this 30 million, which, as the Minister said, is a substantial part of their overall commitment. And they will help us address some of these higher risk asset classes, which otherwise we would not be able to do. And if we couldn't do it, then almost certainly the private sector would not be doing it. So this will be a way of dealing with some of the considerable number of policy failures, some of the considerable number of market failures, particularly financial market failures, and particular vehicles targeting the harder assets, I would say.
So this is really about the relationship between politics, business, but there is a role here for civil society to support the politics.
Absolutely.
And to push for
Absolutely.
it. So it is the three main players coming together.
And if I can underline that, again, we haven't had one of these examples yet on the Luxembourg platform, but I'm sure we will have in the future. Some of the most interesting, the highest impact environmental funds we've done recently have been together with civic society, explicitly with civic society. If I can quote you an example, we have a fund called the Althelia Fund, which, as it happens, is domiciled in Luxembourg and could easily have been on this platform if the platform had existed. But they have done fantastic projects in Peru, in other parts of South America, where they work with a local NGO, a regional NGO even. Nice aeroplane, lots of carbon coming in, where they work with a regional NGO which is deeply integrated into the local community. It's a way of getting confidence from the local community, from the local, in that case, smallholder farmers, and we get the best of both worlds, really. We get local community engagement, we get expert financial structuring, and we mobilize international capital into that. One example.
Yeah, is Luxembourg alone here, or are there other nations making? I mean, what's the gambit? Are there other people?
Luxembourg is the first mover here. Luxembourg is the front runner here, and you perhaps know it or you don't know it, but actually Luxembourg has announced a number of very exciting initiatives in the last few months, all around the theme of green finance or financial finance. I'll let the Minister elaborate on those. But to come back to this platform, this is the only one of the kind at the moment with Luxembourg, but we hope it's not going to be the last.
Yes.
And my own little dream is that in a few years' time, we'll look back on this one, which will hopefully be replicated, perhaps on a bigger scale by Luxembourg, perhaps by other countries, and we will refer to this as the Luxembourg model.
But I may add somehow that we're not alone in really scaling up climate finance. We saw it, and it has been presented at the pre-COP, and we will speak about the roadmap to the 100 billion. So we see that there's lots of dynamism, that lots of governments are making a strategy how to finance climate change. And I think this is here in Marrakesh that we have the opportunities to have the exchange of best practice, of models that already exist or are being created. And I think now we have the chance to have everyone here speaking and scaling up what we are doing in exchanging best practice.
Because it really is about tangible action now, isn't it? And one of the things, when I've spoken to other people between COP21 and COP22, there was sort of, I'd say, disappointment that policymakers and the investment community weren't moving fast enough. And to be honest, there seems to be a lot of surprise that we've actually got an agreement signed. You know, so are we actually now starting to see the tangible action? Is that really?
Yeah, I think if you look what happened, so in Luxembourg, I can tell you what we're working on Luxembourg in. So this is one part of the puzzle, but in September there was the first green stock exchange day in Luxembourg. Luxembourg at the moment having 50% of the green bonds on a worldwide scale. So we are trying to really leverage, to build the bridges between, because it's a question of where the money goes,
Yes.
And in order to be transparent, we also launched in September a new climate label.
Yes.
In order to be transparent, but because you also have to look at the projects themselves, and I think there's lots of movement we see and lots of initiatives being announced here at the COP from lots of actors, also private actors, and this gives me hope that there's really a big change in the mind of people.
And I,
When you go on.
if I can just add to what the Minister said, I spend a lot of time talking to investors and institutional investors, all kinds of investors who are interested in the climate space and who, for the last 25 years, have been saying we can't do it without the political leadership. That excuse is gone. That leadership is there, notwithstanding what's been happening in the last week, but that leadership is still there. And you talk now to all kinds of investors. I listened earlier this week to the controller of the New York State Pension Fund. He has 185 billion underneath his control. He's got 1 million subscribers to his pension scheme, and he says, at this point, we are past the point of no return. Okay, doesn't matter now what happens. We can see clearly the risks of not decarbonising. We can see what that's going to do to our liability, to our assets. We can't afford for that to happen. We look at the American coal industry. We look at the oil and gas industry. We see how much value has been lost in those industries. These guys are wanting to shift now, and to help them shift, what we have to do now is to make sure the opportunities are there for them to move their money into good, green, decarbonised assets. And this is part of the answer to that.
There is the other side to that, isn't there? The not doing it poses a huge risk.
Huge threat.
And that's what people are don't seem to grasp fast enough.
75% of the American coal industry is in Chapter 11 at the moment. Coal production in the States went down 10% last year. The oil and gas industry lost 65 billion last year. There's 235 billion of junk debt sitting outside the oil and gas industry. I mean, from a financial investor's viewpoint, the messages could hardly be clearer. But you do need to give them other places to put their money, positive places to put their money, sustainable places to put their money, and there are all sorts of areas where we can do that. The obvious ones: renewable energy, energy efficiency, but we also need to look at the other issues, the other sectors, the land issues, the resource issues, and that is where I believe that this platform, the Luxembourg platform, will play a very prominent place.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you
Good
very
talk to
much.
you.
Good, Minister. Thank you. That was good.